Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted, as always, to be joined by Danny. This is the big fight breakdown for the big fight at 154 pounds between the champion Israil Madrimov and the challenger Terence Crawford, taking place on August the 3rd in Los Angeles. If you enjoy this video and would like to see more, please do click that subscribe button for a range of content. And yeah, we'll crack on with it. Danny, good to be joined by you as always. Looking forward to this one. I think it's a fight that maybe a couple of years ago, not many people would have predicted was going to happen. I've got a few talking points. The first one I've got is Madrimov the best that 154 has to offer? He's obviously the WBA world champion at the weight. But there are other good fights at the weight as well. Tim Zhu is obviously seen as the number one possibly before he lost to Sebastian Fundora. Of course, Sebastian Fundora is a name as well. Virgil Ortiz, I suppose, has got to be considered a super welterweight as well. I know it's a tough question, but that's what we're here for, the tough questions. Is Israil Madrimov the best that 154 has to offer?
It's a tough question, and I'm probably not going to give you a straight answer. I think it would be very harsh not to have Tim Tszyu or Fundora as your number one, based purely on that run Tim Tszyu went
Mm.
on up until that fight, and then even the Fundora fight, like his team really should have pulled him out of that fight and try and get it ruled a no contest. So I don't hold that against him too much. However, in terms of ability, I think there's a case to be made that Madrimov's right up there. However, his resume doesn't stack up to a Tim Tszyu or even a Fundora. He doesn't have his best win is probably Kurbanov, who a solid fighter has been fortunate a couple of times, saying that no one's done to him what Madrimov did to him. He battered him really. The Liam Smith fight was a close fight. I think the Soro fight, I've not watched it. A lot of people think that was a really bad decision, but regardless, they didn't get close to doing to Kurbanov what Madrimov did. So, in terms of ability, you could definitely make a case for it. Although personally, I like to do rankings based on who people have actually beat. And even though I'm a fan of Madrimov, I'm not sure you could have him as a number one based on that criteria.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And look, obviously, there are promotional machines that are promoting this fight, i.e., Eddie Hearn, DAZN, Matchroom. Obviously, and you're going to see a lot of social stuff on social media that's bigging up Madrimov, which there should be. He's clearly a fantastic fighter. I think for me, he's got 10 professional wins. And I just think when you compare that to Tim Zhu, Sebastian Fundora, the fighters we mentioned, there's a gap there in terms of kind of the amount of wins they've got under their belts. Madrimov kind of to be a world champion in with only 10 wins is fantastic. But yeah, I just think he needs to have a bit of a deeper resume to be considered the best in the division. But he's a threat nonetheless. And unlike some of the guys we've mentioned, he's still undefeated as well. Terence Crawford obviously started his career at lightweight. Danny's kind of become undisputed at more than one weight, worked his way up the divisions throughout his career, which many fighters do. At 154 now, obviously, this is taking place before the press conference, the weigh-in, before we kind of have a look at what Terence Crawford looks like at that weight. Without giving any predictions away, does the step up in weight, does that concern you? Do you think it could be one step up too many for Terence Crawford?
I'm sort of torn with regards to what way I think the weight will affect Crawford. On one hand, there's all the points you just mentioned. He started off as a lightweight. He wasn't a particularly big welterweight. Errol Spence was a lot bigger than him when they fought last year. So by that logic, you would think, stepping up another half a stone isn't going to do him any favors. Then on the other hand, he's 37. He'll have been out of the ring for over a year, well over a year by the time the fight happens. You would think at that age, having had the amount of fights he had, maybe having that extra 7 pounds will actually benefit him, give him more energy. So again, I'm not really sure what way I would think. I mean, he's going to be oversized by Madrimov. That was always going to be the case, but it could actually prove to be, to his benefit, having that extra cushion at his age and at this stage of his career.
Yeah, I'm going to be fascinated by what happens at the weigh-in, and on fight night as well. Like what weight is Madrimov going to be in, come the first bell compared to Crawford. So it's going to be be really interesting. we've got a schedule. I'm going to go slightly off schedule, Danny, because I know you have the odd flutter every so often, as do I. Um, Israil Madrimov is a 4-1 outsider just to win this fight. The platform that I'm using, 4-1 to win to win the fight, 8-1 by KO, 8-1 by decision. Does that I don't want to say alarm you at all, but does that surprise you that he's that much of an underdog here? He's the one who's a world champion and established at 154. Crawford's the one who's been out the ring for a year, is in his late 30s now. Does that surprise the odds are that wide?
Sort of, but I can understand because obviously Crawford's the marquee name, and people have saw what he did to Errol Spence, who's probably dimension wise a similar sized fighter to Madrimov. I would imagine Madrimov's not a huge 154 pounder, and obviously he was regarded as one of, if not the best welterweight in the world when that fight was happening. However, I think Errol Spence was there to be beat that night. I think he was a shell of what he was 3, 4 years before. Don't get me wrong, Crawford couldn't have done it in any better fashion, and I don't think any other welterweights would have did it in that good a fashion. However, I think there potentially could have been 4 or 5 welterweights who could have beaten Errol Spence and stopped Errol Spence on that night. You have the car crash, you have the way he was living outside of the ring, um, the multiple facial surgeries. I mean, you noticed he was slurring his words even before that fight. He's even worse now. I think he's just pulled out of the Fundora fight. So I think that was far cry from the best Errol Spence. And I think those odds are really, really tempting on Madrimov personally. I know we might get into predictions in a bit, but I can understand why, given certain factors, the public perception, because that obviously has an influence on odds as well, has skewed things that way, but they appeal to me. I'll be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah. I think for me, when you consider what going back to like the weights beforehand and Crawford stepping up in weight and Madrimov after seeing what Madrimov did to Kurbanov, eight
Yeah.
to one for Madrimov to win by stoppage appeals to me. But we'll get on to predictions. Maybe we'll even do a betting show a bit closer to the time. Who knows? Um, Again, without giving the without giving predictions away, Danny. Um, One of the things that's a bit frustrating, a bit annoying about boxing is when people talk about just other fights that aren't made, aren't close to being made when fighters have a fight that's in front of them. However, we are going to do that now. Will we see Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford if Crawford wins? Just been announced Canelo Alvarez is going to fight Edgar Berlanga in September. Let's be honest, he's widely expected to win that fight. Um, so these schedules could work out so that those guys could possibly meet each other in early 2025. Do you think we will see that fight early 2025 if Canelo and Crawford both win?
I think we will happen. It will happen if they both win, as you say. I think Turkey's made it very clear he wants that fight. That tends to mean it happens.
Yeah.
I know Canelo hasn't sounded as keen on it. He sort of said, what do I have to gain from it? If I beat Crawford, people would just say you beat a much smaller fighter. But I don't really understand if it's not going to be Crawford and it's not going to be David Benavidez, and it certainly looks like it's not going to be David Benavidez. Who's it going to be? What Berlanga is he going to go? Munguia, Berlanga, Eubank. That's a fairly uninspiring 3 fight run. So I think if Turkey wants it to happen, he'll offer absurd amount of money, and Canelo just say, "Okay, fine." So I think if they both win, that'll happen.
Going slightly off track. I've got one. You mentioned like an uninspiring Canelo run, which I completely agree with, by the way. Do you think one fight we could see Canelo face next instead of Benavidez, instead of Eubank Jr., instead of Crawford, beginning of 2025, could be the winner or the loser of Beterbiev Bivol? Do you think that's a possibility? I can see
I
your
don't think
temperature side.
so.
It's no. I thought you were going to agree with me then.
Because I think hasn't Benavidez just said he wants the winner.
Right.
I think Benavidez said he wants the winner. He's sort of mandatory for both WBC titles, and I don't think Canelo wants to rematch. Does he really want to fight either of them? Really?
No.
Don't know. I don't think. I
Surely.
think Canelo's genuine. I think Canelo is petrified of losing again. To be
Mm.
honest.
Mm. We'll see. No, look, some potential kind of big, massive super fights happening in the next 12 months. All right, we've covered quite a lot there, Danny. We are going to do some predictions. I feel like this is quite a tough one to predict. I think we both said we've tempted by those Madrimov odds, but we're going to do official predictions to end the video. I'll let you go first, and I might copy you. What's your prediction here? Give it to us.
I'm so tempted to predict Madrimov. Honestly, I think he'll Crawford will never have been hit by anyone who punches as hard as Madrimov. Really, I mean, Kavalaskas caught him clean at welterweight. Madrimov's so athletic. He's got great footwork. He's got great punch selection. I think he has got slight gas tank concerns, but I think 37 years of age is Crawford now, up in weight, a year and a bit out of the ring. Fighters can look old overnight. I think he does start to look a bit older now, personally. Fuck it, I'll go Madrimov KO. Let's go.
Yeah, and I can't I can't blame you for saying that. I just think from a from like, as we keep on going back to these Madrimov odds from a betting perspective, you've got to like anyone who knows anything about boxing has got to be tempted to put
Yeah,
Madrimov. Um, I think this is going to be a really good fight.
yeah,
And I don't say this with a huge amount of confidence, but I would have to go for Crawford. Whether it's I can imagine Crawford winning on points actually, just because he's not going to stand there and try and trade with Madrimov. I don't he's not stupid. So
yeah.
if I had to be pushed for a precise prediction, I would actually go for Crawford points. But I'm not gonna put my life on that. I think that Madrimov is being overseen for a variety of factors that we have mentioned. Um, we'll see what happens. I think it's a really interesting one, a potential fight of the year contender. Obviously, a fantastic undercard as well that we're really looking forward to as well. Danny, good to be joined by you. Good to get some opinions flowing about, and we will see what happens. I will speak to you again very, very soon.